Brynlee Carter, 24, sat alone in her graduation gown, scanning the empty seats reserved for her family. 4 years of relentless work at MIT, graduating summa cum laude in quantum physics, yet they chose Melody's elementary school ballet recital instead. Little did I know that this abandonment would lead me to uncover the devastating truth that would shatter our family forever and set me on a path of calculated revenge that no one saw coming. Hey everyone! Before I dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. This family drama took me on a wild journey of discovery and revenge that I'm still processing. If you've ever felt overlooked by your family, this story might resonate with you. Hit that like button if you've ever had your moment stolen, and subscribe to join me for more shocking true stories like this one. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I believed we were the perfect American family. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Carter, seemed to embody the American dream. He was a successful corporate attorney, she was a respected pediatrician, and they had built a beautiful life in our colonial-style home with its manicured lawn and white picket fence. As their firstborn, I had always worked hard to make them proud, excelling in academics and following their carefully plotted path to success. My sister Melody arrived when I was 8 years old, and from the moment she joined our family, the dynamic shifted dramatically. While I had always been praised for my intellectual achievements, Melody captivated everyone with her artistic talents and sweet disposition. She had my mother's golden curls and my father's deep blue eyes, while I had always been told I took after some distant relative with my auburn hair and hazel eyes. Brynlee, darling, you must understand that your sister needs extra encouragement, my mother would say whenever I expressed feeling overlooked. Your path has always been so clear, but the arts are such a challenging field. This was the refrain I heard throughout my teenage years, as piano recitals, dance performances, and art exhibitions took precedence over my debate championships, science Olympiads, and academic honors. Don't misunderstand. I loved Melody. She was a kind-hearted child who never asked to be the center of attention. At 16, when I was accepted to MIT with a full scholarship, she made me a handmade card that I treasured. To my brilliant big sister who will change the world, she had written in her careful script surrounding the words with tiny painted stars. It wasn't her fault that our parents consistently prioritized her activities over mine. Throughout my college years, I had come to terms with being secondary in my parents' eyes. I threw myself into my studies, building a reputation as one of the most promising students in my department. Dr. Whitman, my quantum physics professor and mentor, had even secured me a position at CERN following graduation, an opportunity beyond my wildest dreams. When I called home with the news, my father had said, "That's wonderful, sweetheart," before immediately turning the conversation to Melody's upcoming ballet recital, where she would play the role of a snowflake. I had marked my graduation date on the family calendar a year in advance. I sent formal invitations 3 months before the ceremony. I confirmed with my parents the week before, and they assured me they wouldn't miss it for the world. "We're so proud of you, Brynlee," my mother had said. "We've already booked our flights." So when I sat in the ceremony hall continuously checking my phone for messages and scanning the entrance for their familiar faces, I refused to believe they wouldn't show. The seats I had saved remained conspicuously empty as names were called and students walked across the stage, mine included. After the ceremony, as my classmates celebrated with their families, I stood awkwardly to the side, still clutching my phone. When it finally rang, I answered immediately. "Brynlee, sweetie, I'm so sorry." My mother's voice came through the sound of applause in the background. Melody's dance instructor moved her solo to today, and you know how important this showcase is for her summer program application. We just couldn't miss it. I stood there, diploma in hand, surrounded by joyful families, as something inside me finally broke. "You just missed your daughter graduating summa cum laude from MIT," I said quietly. We're so proud of you, honey. You know that my father chimed in, having apparently taken the phone. We'll make it up to you, I promise. We'll take you out for a special dinner when you come home next week. Don't bother, I replied and hung up. That night, instead of attending the graduation parties, I sat alone in my apartment and made a decision. I was done seeking their approval. I was done being the responsible, understanding daughter who always took a back seat to her sister's activities. The position at CERN awaited me, and I would go without looking back. I didn't need their validation anymore. Little did I know that this moment of clarity would lead me down a path that would uncover secrets my family had kept buried for decades. Secrets that would explain why I had always felt like an outsider in my own home, and why, despite all my achievements, I had never quite been enough for them. 3 months into my new life in Geneva, I had settled into a comfortable routine. My work at CERN was challenging and fulfilling, my apartment small but cozy, and I had made a few friends among the international community of physicists. I had spoken to my family only sporadically since graduation, brief cordial calls that maintained the appearance of connection without any real substance. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday in September, everything changed. I returned home to find a thick manila envelope in my mailbox with no return address, just my name and address written in an unfamiliar hand. Inside was a stack of documents and a handwritten note that read, "Brinley, I believe you deserve to know the truth. Your parents aren't who you think they are. A friend." My first instinct was to dismiss it as some kind of strange prank, but curiosity compelled me to examine the contents more carefully. What I found sent my world spiraling into chaos. Birth certificates, adoption papers, and legal documents, all pointing to one inescapable conclusion. Richard and Eleanor Carter were not my biological parents. According to these papers, I had been adopted as an infant, while Melody was their biological child. My hands shook as I spread the documents across my kitchen table. There was my original birth certificate, listing my birth mother as Sophia Mitchell, age 19, father unknown. There were court documents showing that the Carters had legally adopted me through a private arrangement. There was even a photograph of a young woman holding a newborn, presumably Sophia, with me, her expression a complex mixture of love and grief. The final document in the pile was the most shocking, a receipt for $50,000 paid to Sophia Mitchell from Richard Carter, dated just days after my birth. Had they bought me? Was I some kind of transaction? I sat there, staring at the evidence of my entire life's lie until the sun came up. Every memory replayed in my mind with this new context, the subtle ways I had been treated differently, the comments about not looking like either of them, the constant prioritization of Melody. It all made perfect, horrible sense. That morning, I called in sick to work for the first time since I'd started at CERN. I needed to process this information to decide what to do next. My first impulse was to call my parents, know the Carters, and demand answers, but something held me back. If they had kept this secret from me for 24 years, confronting them directly might just lead to more lies. Instead, I began my own investigation. The documents provided enough information for me to start searching for Sophia Mitchell. According to her driver's license copy in the package, she had lived in Boston at the time of my birth. I spent hours scouring social media and online directories, but found nothing conclusive. Either she had no online presence or she had changed her name. After days of dead ends, I reached out to a college friend who now worked at a private investigation firm. Explaining that I was trying to find a long-lost relative, I provided what little information I had. "This might take some time," he warned, "but I'll see what I can do." While waiting for news, I debated whether to confront the Carters. Part of me wanted to lash out to make them feel the pain and betrayal I was experiencing, but another part recognized the strategic advantage of keeping my discovery secret. Knowledge was power, and for once I held information they didn't know I possessed. 2 weeks later, my investigator friend called with news. I found her, Brinley. Sophia Mitchell is alive and living in Portland, Oregon. She's a high school art teacher, never married, no other children. I'm sending you her contact information and address now." I stared at the email that arrived moments later, containing the current details of the woman who had given birth to me. My biological mother was real, alive, and suddenly within reach. Did she think about me? Did she regret giving me up? Did she know how the Carters had treated me? After drafting and deleting countless emails, I finally sent a simple message to her work address. "My name is Brinley Carter. I believe you might be my birth mother. I recently discovered my adoption and would like to connect if you're open to it." The reply came within hours, Brinley. "I've waited for this day for 24 years. Yes, I am your mother. There's so much I need to tell you, things you need to know about your adoption. Can we talk?" We arranged a video call for the following evening. As I waited for her face to appear on my screen, my heart pounded so hard I thought it might break through my chest. And then there she was, a woman with my same hazel eyes, my same auburn hair, my same slightly crooked smile. The resemblance was so striking it brought tears to my eyes. "You look just like I imagined you would," she said softly, her own eyes glistening. "Why did you give me up?" The question burst from me before I could temper it with politeness. Her face clouded with pain. "Brinley, I need you to know something important. I never wanted to give you up. You were taken from me." "Taken from you? What do you mean?" My voice trembled as I stared at Sophia's face on my laptop screen, searching for any sign that she might be lying or exaggerating. But all I saw was raw pain and a sincerity that resonated deep within me. Sophia took a deep breath and began her story. "I was 19 when I had you a scholarship student at Boston University. Your father was my professor, married, influential, and 20 years my senior. When I told him I was pregnant, he panicked about the scandal it would cause and offered me money to take care of it. But I already loved you fiercely and refused." She paused, visibly struggling with the memories. "That's when things got ugly. He threatened to ruin my academic career to make sure I'd never finish college if I went public with the pregnancy. But I stood my ground. I had supportive parents who said they would help me raise you." I listened spellbound as she continued. "Then, in my 7th month, your father approached me again, but this time with Richard Carter, who he introduced as his attorney. They offered me a deal, a substantial sum of money, enough to pay for the remainder of my education if I would give you up for adoption to the Carters. They presented it as a win-win. I could finish my degree and you would have a stable, wealthy home. And you agreed." I couldn't keep the accusation out of my voice. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "No, Brinley, I didn't. I refused. But after you were born, things happened that I still can't fully explain. I was very ill after delivery, some kind of infection that left me delirious with fever. When I recovered enough to be lucid, they told me you had died." My hand flew to my mouth. "They told you I died," Sophia nodded, wiping tears away. I was devastated. "They showed me paperwork, a death certificate that I now know was falsified. I was so ill, so grief-stricken I couldn't think clearly. By the time I recovered fully and began asking more questions, demanding to see your grave, they produced adoption papers with my signature, a signature I believe was forged while I was incapacitated. So the Carters, they stole me. The implications were staggering. Richard Carter was a powerful attorney with connections throughout the Boston legal system. By the time I was well enough to fight, they had covered their tracks thoroughly. When I tried to challenge the adoption, I was threatened with criminal charges for accepting payment for a baby, money I had never actually agreed to take, but had been deposited in my account. They had constructed a narrative where I was the unstable young woman who had sold her baby and then changed her mind. I felt physically sick. "But you've known where I was all this time. Why didn't you try to find me sooner?" "I never stopped looking for you," Sophia said firmly. But they changed your name from Olivia, what I had named you, to Brinley, and the adoption records were sealed. The Carters moved away from Boston shortly after getting you. I hired private investigators over the years, but Richard knew how to cover his tracks. It was only recently that I managed to locate you after seeing an article about your work at CERN that included a photograph. I recognized my own eyes staring back at me. So you sent me the documents, I realized. She nodded. I wasn't sure how to approach you directly. I thought you should have time to process the truth before deciding if you wanted to meet me. We talked for hours that night, filling in the blanks of each other's lives. Sophia had eventually finished her degree and become an art teacher, channeling her grief into creativity and helping young people. She had never married, never had other children, carrying the wound of my loss with her always. There's something else you should know, she said, as our conversation was winding down. Eleanor Carter isn't just some random woman who wanted a baby. She's your biological father's sister. Your adoption wasn't arranged out of the goodness of their hearts. It was a family cover-up orchestrated to protect your biological father's reputation and career. This revelation hit me like a physical blow. Eleanor, the woman I had called mother all my life, was actually my aunt, and her coldness toward me, her obvious preference for Melody, suddenly made perfect sense. Every time she looked at me, she saw her brother's infidelity, his moral failure embodied in a child she had been pressured to raise. Do you know if he's still alive, my biological father? I asked. He is, Sophia replied carefully. He's now the president of Boston University. His name is William Harrington. The name sent a jolt through me. I had seen it in academic publications on lists of influential educators. I had even applied for a scholarship named after him when I was in high school, a scholarship I hadn't received despite my qualifications. As we prepared to end the call, Sophia hesitated. What will you do now, Brinley? Will you confront the Carters? I considered the question carefully. The hurt and anger swirling inside me demanded justice, demanded that they face consequences for what they had done, not just to me but to Sophia. I need time to think, I finally said. But I don't think I'll warn them that I know. Not yet. After we disconnected, I sat in the dark of my apartment, piecing together the fragments of this new reality. The family that had always made me feel like an outsider had deliberately brought me into their home not out of love, but as part of an elaborate cover-up. They had stolen me from a mother who wanted me, then spent my entire childhood subtly punishing me for existing. In that moment, something crystallized within me. Not just pain or anger, but a cold, clear purpose. They would pay for what they had done. All of them. But not through some emotional confrontation that they could dismiss or explain away. No, my revenge would be as calculated and meticulous as the deception they had perpetrated. I was a physicist after all. I understood that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, and their actions had set in motion forces they could not begin to imagine. For the next 2 months, I lived a double life. By day, I was Dr. Brinley Carter, the brilliant young physicist, making waves at CERN with my groundbreaking research. By night, I was a detective and strategist, piecing together the elaborate puzzle of my family's deception and meticulously planning my response. I maintained normal, if distant, communication with the Carters. Our weekly calls were brief and superficial, them telling me about Melody's latest achievements, me sharing sanitized versions of my work in Switzerland. I became an expert at injecting just the right amount of warmth into my voice while feeling nothing but cold determination. Meanwhile, Sophia and I grew closer through daily video calls and messages. She shared everything she remembered about the circumstances of my birth and the subsequent cover-up, including names of hospital staff and copies of the few documents she had managed to keep from that time. I began constructing a comprehensive timeline, identifying the key players in the conspiracy. William Harrington, my biological father, was the first target in my investigation. His rise to prominence in academia had been meteoric, from professor to department chair to dean, and finally to university president. He had published acclaimed books, received prestigious awards, and was known for his public speeches on ethics in education of all things. His reputation was pristine, his legacy secure. Until now. Through careful research, I discovered that Sophia hadn't been his only victim. There were whispers about other inappropriate relationships with students hushed up by the university administration. Money had changed hands, careers had been redirected, lives had been altered to protect this man who had built his success on exploitation and deceit. Richard Carter's involvement went beyond just helping his brother-in-law. As I dug deeper, I uncovered a pattern of ethically questionable legal maneuvers throughout his career. The adoption fraud in my case wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern of manipulation of the legal system for wealthy clients. He had built his reputation on being the attorney who could make problems disappear, regardless of the human cost. And Eleanor, the woman who had raised me with such obvious reluctance, had her own secrets. Beyond her complicity in my adoption, she had been writing prescriptions for herself for years, a subtle addiction to anxiety medication that she hid behind her perfect facade. As a respected pediatrician, any hint of substance issues would devastate her professional standing. Even sweet, innocent Melody wasn't who she appeared to be. At 16, she was already engaging in risky behaviors that would break her parents' hearts, drinking, skipping school, to meet an older boyfriend and maintaining a secret social media presence where she mocked the very parents who doted on her. Each discovery was a piece in the mosaic of revenge I was assembling, but I needed more, something definitive that would trigger the collapse of their carefully constructed world. The opportunity came from an unexpected source. Dr. Whitman, my mentor from MIT, reached out with exciting news. Boston University was hosting an international symposium on quantum physics, and he had recommended me as a keynote speaker. The president himself requested you specifically after seeing your recent paper, he told me. This could be huge for your career, Brinley. The irony was almost too perfect. William Harrington, the man who had denied my existence for 24 years now, wanted to showcase my achievements at his university. He likely had no idea who I really was. The resemblance between us wasn't striking enough to raise suspicion without context, and he had probably never given Sophia Mitchell another thought after ensuring my disappearance from her. Life. I accepted the invitation immediately. The symposium was scheduled for 3 months later, giving me ample time to refine my plan. I would return to Boston not just as a scientific prodigy, but as the living embodiment of the crimes they had all committed. "Are you sure about this?" Sophia asked, when I shared my intentions. Confronting them could be traumatic, and there's no guarantee of justice after all this time. I took her hand through the screen, wishing I could offer real comfort instead of digital connection. "I'm not just going to confront them, Sophia. I'm going to dismantle the entire fiction they've built their lives around, and I'm going to do it so thoroughly and publicly that they'll never recover." As the weeks passed, my plan grew more detailed. I gathered evidence, documents, recordings, testimonies from others Harrington had victimized who were finally willing to speak. I consulted discreetly with a journalist known for exposing academic scandals, sharing just enough to pique her interest without revealing my personal connection. I filed official requests for my complete adoption records, leveraging my status as an adult adoptee to navigate the legal barriers Richard had established. Then, 3 weeks before the symposium, I received an unexpected call from Melody. We rarely spoke directly. Our communication usually filtered through our parents during the family calls. But here she was, her name flashing on my phone screen at midnight Geneva time. "Brinley, I need your help," she said, her voice small and frightened in a way I had never heard before. "I'm in trouble and I can't tell Mom and Dad." "What kind of trouble?" I asked, instantly alert. I'm pregnant, she whispered. 6 weeks. It's Tyler's. You know, the guy I've been seeing, Dad would kill him if he found out. He's 20 and Dad already hates him because he's not going to college. I sat up in bed, mind racing. This wasn't part of my plan. This human complication that reminded me that despite everything, Melody was just a teenager making teenage mistakes. She wasn't responsible for what our parents had done. Have you decided what you want to do? I asked carefully. I want to keep it, she said, with surprising firmness. Tyler and I love each other. But I need to get away from home at least until I figure out how to tell them. I thought maybe I could come stay with you, just for a little while. The request stunned me. Melody wanted to flee to me, the sister who had always been secondary, the one their parents had consistently overlooked in favor of her. There was irony there, but also an unexpected opportunity. Actually, I said slowly, I'm coming to Boston in 3 weeks for a conference. Why don't I come a few days early? We can talk in person, figure out a plan. Her relief was palpable. Really? You'd do that for me? Of course, I said. That's what sisters are for. As I hung up, I felt the first twinge of doubt about my revenge plot. Melody's pregnancy complicated things emotionally, reminding me that my actions would have ripple effects beyond my intended targets. But it also provided an unexpected avenue into the family dynamics I was planning to expose. I've been sharing this journey of discovery and betrayal, and now I'm at the turning point where everything is about to change forever. I know what it's like to feel like you're on the outside looking in at your own family. Have you ever uncovered a secret that made you question everything you thought you knew? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. This next part of my plan required perfect timing and courage I wasn't sure I had. If you're invested in seeing how this all unfolds, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, the way karma comes back around in this story is something you won't want to miss. I arrived in Boston on a crisp autumn day, the familiar skyline, both welcoming and threatening as my plane descended. I had arranged to stay in a hotel rather than with the Carters, citing professional reasons while secretly needing the neutral territory to maintain my composure and focus. Melody met me at the hotel the afternoon. I arrived her typical confidence replaced by a nervous energy that made her seem younger than her 16 years. We hugged awkwardly. Physical affection had never been our strong suit, and I noticed she wore an oversized sweater, despite the mild weather already unconsciously hiding her condition. Thanks for coming early, she said as we settled in the hotel lounge. Mom and Dad think I'm at ballet practice. They have no idea about, How are you feeling? I asked, studying her face. Despite everything, I felt protective of her. Scared. But certain, she replied, touching her stomach lightly. I know everyone will say I'm throwing my life away, but this feels right to me. Tyler's looking for a better job, and his parents said we can stay with them until we figure things out. I nodded, absorbing this information. And you're sure about Tyler? About your relationship? She smiled for the first time since arriving. He's the one good thing in my life right now. Everything else feels like I'm playing a part in someone else's story. Ballet, the private school, the college prep, it's all Mom and Dad's vision, not mine. With Tyler, I'm just me. Her words struck a chord. How well I knew that feeling of performing to fulfill others' expectations while losing sight of oneself. The difference was that Melody, despite being their biological child, was finding the courage to break away at 16 while I had spent 24 years seeking their approval. I understand better than you might think, I told her, but running away isn't a solution. You need a plan, resources, support. That's why I called you, she said, reaching for my hand. You've always been the smart one, the problem solver. And you're the only one who ever really sees me. Mom and Dad look at me and see some perfect reflection of themselves, but you actually know me. Her words caught me off guard, challenging the narrative I had constructed about our family dynamic. Had I been so consumed by resentment that I'd missed Melody's own struggles under the weight of our parents' expectations? What if we faced them together? I suggested an idea forming that could serve both her needs and their plans. After my presentation at the symposium, "You'll be there with Mom and Dad, right?" She nodded. "They've been talking about nothing else since you were announced as a speaker. Dad's even invited some of his important clients." "Perfect," I said, my mind racing ahead. "I need you to make sure everyone attends. Mom, Dad, and if possible, President Harrington should be in the front row. Can you do that?" She looked puzzled but agreed. "Sure, but why is that so important?" "Because what I have to say affects all of us," I replied cryptically, "and afterward we'll address your situation together. I promise they'll be too preoccupied with other matters to overreact about your news." Over the next 3 days, I finalized preparations while maintaining the pretense of normal family interactions. I had dinner with the Carters the night before the symposium, enduring Eleanor's passive-aggressive comments about my appearance. Academia clearly doesn't leave much time for self-care, does it? Dear, and Richard's condescending questions about my little research project. They mentioned repeatedly how President Harrington had specifically requested me as a speaker, watching for my reaction with an intensity that made me wonder if they suspected something. Melody, true to her word, had ensured all the key players would be present for my presentation. William Harrington had even arranged a private lunch afterward, ostensibly to discuss a potential research partnership between CERN and Boston University. The morning of the symposium, I woke before dawn and methodically prepared myself for the day that would change everything. I dressed with particular care in a tailored charcoal suit that projected authority and professionalism. I styled my hair in a way that subtly emphasized my resemblance to Sophia, and I tucked into my presentation folder not just my scientific findings, but also copies of the key documents that would expose decades of deception. The symposium hall was packed when I arrived. In the front row sat the Carters, Richard looking smugly proud, as if my achievements somehow reflected on him. Eleanor coolly elegant with a fixed smile, and Melody beside them giving me a small, encouraging wave. Next to them was William Harrington, distinguished and commanding, completely unaware that his biological daughter was about to take the stage. As I was introduced and made my way to the podium, a strange calm settled over me. All the anxiety and uncertainty of the past months distilled into perfect clarity about what I needed to do. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice steady. "I'm honored to be here today to discuss recent breakthroughs in quantum entanglement theory. But before I delve into the science, I want to address something personal." A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. This wasn't standard protocol for an academic presentation. Many of you know me as Dr. Brinley Carter, but that identity I recently discovered was built on a foundation of lies. I looked directly at the front row, watching the color drain from Richard's face. My actual birth name is Olivia Mitchell, daughter of Sophia Mitchell, who was a student at this very university 24 years ago. The room went completely silent. Eleanor gripped Richard's arm, her knuckles white. William Harrington's expression remained composed, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. What some of you may not know is that my biological father sits in this room today. I continued my gaze, shifting to Harrington, a man who, when faced with the consequences of his relationship with a young student, chose to erase me from existence rather than acknowledge his responsibility. Harrington half rose from his seat, but I pressed on before he could speak. With the help of his brother-in-law, an attorney skilled in manipulating the legal system, and his sister who agreed to raise me as her own, while simultaneously ensuring I never felt truly part of the family, an elaborate fraud was perpetrated. My birth mother was told I had died, adoption papers were forged, and I was raised by people who saw me not as a beloved child, but as a problem to be managed. The journalist I had contacted was in the audience recording every word. I could see her furiously taking notes as the story unfolded. "I have spent the last 6 months gathering evidence," I said, holding up a folder. "Testimony from hospital staff who were pressured to falsify records. Documentation of the financial transactions surrounding my adoption. DNA test results confirming my parentage." And perhaps most damning, similar accounts from other women who were silenced after relationships with the same man. Chaos erupted in the hall. Richard was on his feet, shouting about slander and legal consequences. Eleanor had gone completely still, staring straight ahead as if in shock. William Harrington was being whispered to urgently by university officials, and Melody was looking at me with wide eyes, a mixture of horror and admiration on her face. Security approached the stage, but I held up my hand. "I'm nearly finished," I said calmly. "I didn't come here today seeking sympathy or even justice for myself. I came to ensure that powerful people understand that their actions have consequences, that truth has a way of surfacing despite the most elaborate efforts to suppress it." I looked directly at my biological father. "President Harrington, you've built your career advocating for ethical standards in education. Richard, you've made your fortune helping wealthy clients navigate the legal system. Eleanor, your patients' parents trust you with their children's well-being. Today the world will know who you really are." With that, I gathered my papers and walked off the stage, passing copies of my evidence to the journalist and several university board members who had approached me. The symposium dissolved into pandemonium, with reporters who had come to cover a scientific presentation suddenly finding themselves in the middle of a breaking scandal. Outside the hall, Melody caught up with me, breathless and wide-eyed. "Is it true?" she demanded. "All of it. Every word," I confirmed. She shook her head in disbelief. "So we're not even really sisters. Biologically, we're cousins," I replied. "But DNA doesn't dictate family, Melody. Our relationship is what we choose to make it regardless of what they did." She was quiet for a moment, processing. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "we wait for the fallout. And when it settles, you and I will figure out how to move forward, both with your situation and with whatever remains of our family." As we stood there, my phone buzzed with notifications. The story was already breaking online, spreading through social media and news outlets. William Harrington's name was trending. The university was issuing statements. Former students were coming forward with corroborating accounts. The calculated revenge I had planned for months was unfolding perfectly, the dominoes falling in precisely the sequence I had anticipated. Yet, as I watched Melody's face, witnessed her world crumbling alongside mine, I felt no triumph, only a complicated mixture of justice served and grief for what might have been. "They're going to hate you for this," she whispered. "They already did," I replied softly. "They just hid it better before." The weeks following my revelation at the symposium unfolded like a storm surge, powerful and unstoppable. The story dominated headlines first locally in Boston, then nationally as the scope of the deception became clear. "University president's secret child exposes decades of corruption," screamed one headline. "Prestigious family's web of lies unraveled by quantum physicist daughter," declared another. William Harrington resigned from his position at Boston University within 48 hours, citing personal reasons, while his lawyers issued carefully worded statements, neither confirming nor denying my claims. It didn't matter. The DNA test results I had arranged spoke for themselves, and more women were coming forward with similar stories of exploitation and cover-ups during his academic career. Richard's law firm placed him on immediate leave, pending an investigation into ethical violations. Several of his former clients began questioning the legality of his practices, and the Massachusetts Bar Association launched a formal inquiry. His carefully cultivated reputation as a fixer for the elite crumbled as reporters dug into other potentially fraudulent adoptions he had handled. Eleanor perhaps suffered the most immediate consequences. The hospital where she practiced suspended her privileges after learning about the prescription irregularities I had uncovered. Parents of her patients, horrified by the emerging story, began transferring their children to other pediatricians. The woman who had spent her life crafting a perfect image was watching it shatter in real time. Through it all, Melody stayed with me in my hotel room, both of us watching the destruction of our family from a strange remove. She had yet to tell the Carters about her pregnancy, though it seemed almost trivial compared to the secrets now exposed. "They want to talk to you," she told me on the 5th day, holding out her phone. "They've been calling non-stop." I had ignored all their attempts to contact me, letting their desperate voicemails pile up unheard. "What do they say?" I asked. Melody shrugged. "Dad threatens legal action 1 minute, then begs for a private conversation the next. Mom mostly cries and says there are explanations you need to hear." "And what do you think I should do?" She considered this carefully. "I think you should hear them out, not for their sake, but for yours. And maybe for mine too. I still don't understand how they could do this." She was right. Despite the satisfaction of watching their public downfall, I needed closure. The next morning, I agreed to meet them at their home, the house I had grown up in but never truly belonged to. They looked broken when they opened the door. Richard, usually impeccably dressed, was unshaven and rumpled. Eleanor had aged a decade in a week, her face drawn and eyes hollow. They led us silently to the living room, where we had once posed for countless family photographs, all forced smiles and careful positioning. Why? It was the only question that mattered, and I directed it at Eleanor. "Why take me if you never wanted me?" she flinched. "It wasn't that simple, Brinley Olivia," I corrected. "My name is Olivia." She nodded, accepting this small reclamation. William came to us desperate. The girl, Sophia, was refusing to get rid of the baby. He was about to receive a major promotion, and a scandal would have destroyed everything he'd worked for. Richard suggested adoption as the solution, but finding someone trustworthy, someone who would keep the secret. She trailed off. "So you volunteered?" I finished for her. "We couldn't have children then," Richard interjected. "We'd been trying for years. It seemed like an answer for everyone." "Except for Sophia," I countered. "And except for me." "We gave you every advantage," Richard argued, a flash of his old self emerging. "The best schools, every opportunity. We raised you as our own." "Did you?" I challenged. Because from where I stood, I was always the outsider. And once Melody arrived, your real child, the difference became painfully clear. Eleanor had the decency to look ashamed. I tried Brinley. "Olivia, but every time I looked at you, I saw my brother's betrayal, his weakness. It wasn't fair to you, I know that now." And telling Sophia I had died, forging adoption papers. Those were Richard's ideas. I assume Richard didn't deny it. There were legal complications. She was changing her mind. We did what was necessary. "You stole a child," I said simply. "You destroyed a young woman's life and treated her daughter as an inconvenience for the next 2 decades. Melody, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Is that how you'll see my baby? As an inconvenience, a problem to solve?" The revelation hung in the air between us. Eleanor gasped, reaching instinctively toward her daughter, but Melody moved away from her touch. "You're pregnant?" Richard asked, his voice hollow. 16 and pregnant, Melody confirmed a challenge in her tone. "Just like Sophia was." "Will you try to steal my baby too, or just pressure me to make it disappear?" The parallels were too perfect, the cycle threatening to repeat itself. But I could see the difference immediately. The shock in their faces was giving way not to calculation but to fear. Fear of losing another daughter. Fear of further public scandal. Fear that their carefully constructed world, already crumbling, would completely collapse. "No one is taking your baby," I said firmly. "And no one is making you disappear." That's the difference between then and now. You have me. Over the next several hours, we negotiated a new reality. Melody would live with me temporarily while finishing high school online. The Carters would provide financial support for her and the baby but respect her decisions. I would not pursue legal action against them if they cooperated fully with the investigations already underway. As for my relationship with them, nothing was resolved. Too much damage had been done, too many years lost. But seeing them stripped of their power, forced to confront their actions without the shield of wealth and influence, I found the burning need for revenge had diminished. Justice was being served without my continued effort. 3 days later, I took Melody to Portland to meet Sophia. Watching my birth mother embrace the girl who had been raised as my sister was a moment of such complex emotion that I still struggle to describe it. There was grief for what all of us had lost, but also a strange new beginning. A family forming not from obligation or deception, but from choice. I returned to CERN the following month with both closure and new beginnings. My research continued, though, now with a certain celebrity attached to my name that made me uncomfortable. The journalist who had helped break my story wrote a best-selling book about the case, with proceeds going to organizations supporting victims of academic sexual misconduct. William Harrington eventually faced multiple lawsuits and was stripped of his academic honors. Richard's legal career ended with a disbarment. Eleanor, after intensive therapy, reached out with a handwritten letter of apology that I have read but not yet responded to. Melody gave birth to a daughter she named Sophia, a tribute to my birth mother that moved us all. She and Tyler are making their way stumbling sometimes, but supported by a family that now spans blood relations and chosen connections. As for me, I finally feel free of the need to prove myself worthy of love. The little girl who sat alone at her MIT graduation has found something more valuable than revenge. She has found her truth, her origins, and in the most unexpected way, her power. The universe, like quantum particles, has a strange way of finding balance. Actions have consequences, and secrets, no matter how deeply buried, eventually find their way to the light. Today marks 2 years since the symposium that changed everything. Melody and her daughter Sophia are thriving in Portland, where Sophia has become the grandmother she never thought she'd be. Tyler proved himself far more responsible than anyone expected, working 2 jobs while taking night classes in engineering. The Carters, after much reflection and therapy, have cautiously re-entered their daughter's life as grandparents, though our relationship remains complicated and distant. As for me, I've made peace with both my names, Olivia, the child who was stolen, and Brinley, the woman who reclaimed her power. The truth didn't heal all wounds, but it allowed them to finally close properly. If there's anything I've learned from this journey, it's that family isn't defined by blood or legal documents. It's created through honesty, respect, and chosen connections that weather even the harshest truths. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed your perspective on everything? Or experienced that moment when karma finally balances the scales? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. This channel is all about sharing these powerful moments of truth and justice that reshape our lives. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life family drama stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that secrets don't stay buried forever. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Sometimes the family we create is more powerful than the one we're born into.